One of the most disappointing things to me as someone who loves historical mysteries was finding out as an adult that the lost colony of Roanoke isn't really that much of a mystery. So in case you're not familiar with the story, here's the highlights. So Sir Walter Raleigh sent a bunch of colonists to be the first permanent settlement in the New World. They had lots of people coming over doing peace talks, doing trade, doing exploration, but they hadn't had anybody that was trying to live here permanently yet. So all of these colonists came over with their leader, John White, and they settled in what is now the Outer Banks region of North Carolina. They called their colony Roanoke, and they started making friends with the local tribes and just really trying to settle in and be good neighbors and all of the things. Anyway, so then John White was like, oh my gosh, we're running out of supplies. So he needed to go back to England. So he went back to England, and he ended up getting stuck there for literal years. He was only supposed to be there for, I think, less than a year. And, but it took him way longer than he intended to get back. And when he got back, everybody was gone. All of his colonists, every single one of them was, boop, not there anymore. And all that was left was this word Croatoan carved into a tree. So mysterious. What could it possibly mean? So I've seen a ton of theories from variety of sources about what this means. Some people think it means a disease, think supernatural. Some people think that it means that the Croatoa tribe attacked them. There's tons of theories about what this could mean, but we actually know exactly what it means. We know what it means. So when John White left, he and his colonists were not stupid. They knew there was a huge potential for things to go wrong. So they had a plan, because they knew that they could get attacked by Native Americans or by the Spanish. They could come down with illnesses. There could be bad weather. They're right in the right spot for a hurricane. Like, there's tons of things that could go wrong. They could just run out of supplies before he got back, which seems pretty likely since he got stuck in England for so long, and the whole reason he'd gone back was because they were getting low on supplies. Anyway, so they knew that there was a huge chance to go wrong. So John White had told them that if something did go wrong, they should move 50 miles into the Main. And this has been interpreted by a lot of people to mean mainland. So thinking that they moved further into North Carolina, but we actually don't know what they meant by that. At that time, the Main could have meant a ton of different things. I mean, it could have meant the main waterway. It could have meant a number of different things. But the thing that makes this not much of a mystery is that the other thing he told them to do was to carve the name of their destination into a tree. He literally told them to do that. And this is, Croatoan is a name of an island that the Native American Croatoa tribe was living on. They had named it the Croatoan Island. They told him exactly where they were going. This is not a mystery. This is not some mysterious word. We know what it means. He literally told them to do this. The real mystery that I can't figure out is why he didn't go look for them there. And we know that he didn't. We know that nobody ever went there to look for the lost colony of Roanoke. But there's tons of reports over the next century or so of this Croatoa Native American tribe having people in it with blue eyes, probably because they intermarried with the colony of Roanoke. And there are people there now. This island is now called Hatteras. It's part of the Outer Banks, and there's people there now doing archaeology, and there's tons of evidence that English colonists lived there and worked there and were living alongside this Native American tribe. There is more than ample evidence that this is exactly what happened, that the people moved to Croatoa Island, period. Now, there are still people looking for the lost colony of Roanoke 50 miles inland because of the whole 50 miles into the Main thing, but it doesn't really make sense to me since they literally said where they were going. And yes, they had that agreement to move 50 miles into the Main, but maybe that's not what they meant by the Main. Maybe that didn't mean into the mainland, but even if it did, I can see how it may have made more sense to them to move in with this Native American tribe that they had already made friends with prior to this, that had supplies and had the ability to help them. The only real mystery to me that's left, besides why they didn't just go look for them on Croatoan Island, is why they left in the first place. And I think that's also probably pretty straightforward. There's lots of theories like the Croatoans could have attacked them, but that doesn't really make sense to me considering, one, they didn't find any bodies there, and they didn't find any evidence of like a lot of graves either. And as far as I know, there haven't been any graves that have been found. There weren't any bodies or any graves found, I think also kind of rules out there being like a mass illness or bad weather that caused a lot of people to die. I really think it sounds like they just ran out of supplies and the Croatoans were like, dude, let us help you. This technically will probably always be considered a mystery despite the overwhelming evidence for this being the case, just because we can't necessarily prove it without a doubt because we don't have any documentation besides this word Croatoan, which I probably is not even there anymore. We need to talk about the Lost Colony. Again, if you haven't watched the original video, I encourage you to do that for context before you watch this one. So in my original video, I said that the real mystery is why John White didn't go look for his colony, why he didn't go look for his people. And that was a little bit tongue-in-cheek because we know why he didn't. But I keep getting comments from people either telling me why he did, which is fine. Like, I know you're not going to read all of the other hundreds or thousands, I don't even know how many comments are on that video now, about what happened, to know that I do know what happened. But I also keep getting comments with these out-of-pocket ideas of why John White did not go looking for his people or why he took so long in England. So we need to talk about why that is. Okay, let's back up the story a little bit. So John White goes back to England. It takes him 3 years to return to the New World. This is not because he's just waiting around or because he's hoping that the people will die. Like, guys, these people are his friends and his literal family. His daughter and granddaughter were part of the colony. He left them behind in the New World, along with all of these other people that he had been living with and working with. These people were basically his chosen family. He is not hoping that they die or get lost. He was very worried about them the entire time he was gone. First of all, the journey itself takes a couple of months. So a good 6 months just for the journey there and back. But also there was a literal war on. The English were at war with the Spanish, and I don't know if you know anything about the Spanish, but they've got a heck of a navy, and a lot of this war was as naval as your belly button. And John White was not a ship's captain. He could not just take a boat and sail across. He needs people to go with him, and he can't just like get a crew, get a boat and go. He needs a captain who is also willing to take him. He needs crew that are willing to go while this war is happening. And also there is a lot of piracy going on. So finding somebody that was willing to take him on this long, arduous journey across the Atlantic Ocean was a problem in the middle of war and piracy. Also, the war likely caused trade issues that may have made it hard for him to get the things that he needed to take back to his people. Now, okay, fast forward, he's actually back now. Why didn't he go to Hatteras, aka Croatoan, to look for his people? Because there was a hurricane coming. There was a hurricane coming, and the captain of the ship that he was sailing on said, get on or get out. Like, we need to leave before this hurricane comes and damages our ship, and we're stuck here forever. And John White was not in the position to be able to say, no, we're waiting, or I'll stay here by myself. Like, nobody else was going to stay with him. And if he couldn't find his people, then he was definitely going to die. Like, he served a better chance going back and trying to come back later. But unfortunately, he ended up dying, I think, less than 3 years later. And at this point, the war is still happening. Lots of piracy is happening. He didn't ever get an opportunity to come back. And I think he was also sick for a good portion of this time. But he was still very concerned about his people. He was not excited that he was not like, oh, I'm not going to go look for them because now I can get a new wife. His wife was not part of the colony. I don't know why people keep saying this. Like, his wife was not part of the colony. His wife, we don't have any record of her around this time. It's likely she died prior to them ever going to the New World in the first place, but she was not part of the colony. We know that for certain. Also, he was not ashamed that they would have joined the Native Americans. That was part of the plan if anything were to go wrong. Now, on to some other things. A lot of people have brought up that the Powhatans said that they attacked the colony at Roanoke and killed them. There are a couple of reasons that I think this is probably not true, but one reason that it might be true. So, first of all, nobody was attacked at Roanoke. Nobody was attacked at Roanoke. There is no evidence of violence. There are no bodies. There are no skeletons. There were 2 people that were dead that had obviously died of natural causes or sickness or something. They were not attacked. They were not murdered. They just died, okay? I've also seen some people suggest that the Native Americans ate them or that they ate each other. Again, there is no evidence of this. There were no bodies, there are no bones. That's not what happened. However, there is a distinct possibility that the colony split up and some of them went to Hatteras. We have evidence of them being at Hatteras. We have found English contemporary things doing archaeology at Hatteras Island. There is extreme amounts of evidence for this being the case. But some of them may have also gone further inland because there has also been evidence of English settlers of that same time period being in that area further inland. There may have been some disagreement about which way they should go, or there may have been part of a plan of some of us are going to go this way, some of us are going to go this way, and hopefully everything will work out. Now, it is distinctly possible that the ones that went further inland came to some kind of harm. It is very possible that the Powhatans did actually attack them there, but we don't actually have any evidence of that, other than the Dare Stones and Powhatans saying that they did. So let's talk about the Dare Stones first. First of all, I and many other historians think that the Dare Stones are probably a hoax. First of all, the stones were found in 1937, which was the 350th anniversary of Virginia Dare being the first English baby born in the New World. And people were talking about it. The lost colony was already at the forefront of people's minds in the media. Lots of stories about this happening because of this special anniversary of Virginia Dare being the first English baby born in the New World. And so the fact that they were found during that time is very suspicious. It's also very suspicious that there were a bunch of other people in this colony, but the first stone that was found was the Dare family stone. The people that are actually like famous from the lost colony, whose names everybody knows. That tells me this is really suspicious. And if I remember correctly, the guy that found it just kind of found it beside the road. It wasn't even like it was hard to find. So the Dare Stones account of what happened with the Powhatans is probably not super reliable. Now, as far as what the Powhatans said themselves, they didn't say anything about this until after the attack on Jamestown, and I get the feeling that one of two things happened. Either the Powhatans were asked about it specifically, and they said, yes, we absolutely did that, either because of a language barrier or because they already wanted people to be afraid of them. They wanted people to leave, and so they were trying to make themselves seem as scary and fearsome as possible, and so saying, yeah, we killed those people too, was in their best interest, or so they thought. Or two, it was coerced out of them by people who were upset that they had done this. And while I believe that John White and Sir Walter Raleigh probably knew what happened to the people in the New World, the regular people did not. And so they were like, oh, well, they attacked us here at Jamestown, so maybe that's what happened to the Roanoke settlers as well. I also need you to understand that nobody returned to the Roanoke, North Carolina in general area until literally over 100 years later. Nobody returned to the area until 1700. Colonization efforts moved way further north. It was mostly in Massachusetts, eventually moved a little bit back down into Virginia with Jamestown, but people were not going to the Outer Banks area or any of the areas in which the Roanoke people might have gone. And why did it take so long for anybody to go back there? Well, it was Sir Walter Raleigh. He was the one that wanted to keep this a mystery, because as long as people believed that the Roanoke colonists might be alive or that their descendants might be alive, he retained the rights to the land and to the colonization efforts of Virginia and the North Carolina territory, which was at that time part of Virginia. So I do think that Sir Walter Raleigh believed that the people were actually alive, but he wasn't willing to go and find out, because if he was wrong and they were dead, he would likely lose the rights to the land and the rights to his ability to send colonies. Now, as far as the splitting up theory, there is a lot of evidence for this. Actually, there has been a lot of evidence found through archaeology at Hatteras Island and at this location 50 miles inland of English people in the late 1500s living in that area. They've found things like buttons and pieces of metal and such that really go a long way to proving that the people of Roanoke may have been in these areas. So the idea that they split up is highly likely. What happened to the people that went inland is more unknown. Obviously, the ones that went to Hatteras probably just intermarried with the Native Americans and lived on in that way. It's possible that the people that went further north were killed at some point by someone or something, or starved or got sick or whatever, or that they eventually went and joined their friends and relatives at Hatteras as well. And last but not least, this is very important, Roanoke, Virginia is not the location of the Roanoke colony. I am really shocked that I have to say that. Okay, it's been a while since I made a history video. I apologize for that. Do not apologize for my hair because I am too pregnant and too tired to care. But I got this comment on the original Roanoke video. If you haven't watched the Roanoke videos, I have a playlist. I highly recommend watching the previous videos before you watch this one so that it makes sense. Also adding the disclaimer here that I am not Native American. I am not speaking for the Native Americans. I am speaking on the historical context that we have, what is historically recorded, what people say today, that is not general knowledge, but is available for everybody to know. This is my special interest, and I know a lot about it from various perspectives. So there are two main lore from the natives about what happened to the colony at Roanoke, and they are pretty in line with what we know and what I believe happened, what I say in my videos happened. So the first one is the Powhatan. So the Powhatan lived in that North Carolina, Virginia area, and when the colony at Jamestown was founded, they ended up attacking them. Now, we don't have a whole lot of record of what they were saying before they attacked Jamestown because they didn't have a written language. They were not keeping records of their stories other than verbally. So the way that we know what they were saying is that then they told the English settlers, and then the English settlers wrote it down. So at this point, they were claiming that they had attacked the colony at Roanoke. I think they were asked, do you know what happened to these people? And they said, yeah, we attacked them, we killed them. Now, if you watch my previous videos, you'll know that they did not attack the Roanoke colony where it was at because there is zero evidence of an attack. There were no bodies, there were no bones, there's nothing that would be in line with people being attacked and killed at that site. However, there is some evidence that the Roanoke colony split up, and some of them went further inland and others went to Croatoan, Hatteras Island with the Croatoan tribe. And those that went further inland, there is evidence that they were attacked at some point. So the Powhatan may have been making this up in order to instill fear. That is not out of line with things that they and other tribes had been known to do. But they may have been telling the truth that they may have attacked that part of the colony that moved further inland. Now, the other lore comes from the Lumbee tribe, which claims to be, and a lot of people believe to be, the remnant of the Croatoan tribe. They tell a lot of stories of Native Americans in their tribe with blue eyes, with lighter skin, with blonde hair. They 100% say that they are the tribe that was the Croatoan, and that the Roanoke remnant joined with them, intermarried with them, lived with them, and even if they didn't intermarry with them, they just became part of the tribe. And so they had these white Indians and other natives that were having aspects that are very clearly not something you're going to find naturally occurring on the North American continent within the North American peoples. Unfortunately, there's not a great way to investigate this further, just based on the limitations of our DNA analysis, as well as the lack of knowing where graves are that would be old enough to really test to see if this was the case. There's been so much intermarriage over the last 400 years that it would be nearly impossible to confirm that someone is descended from or related to those original Roanoke settlers. There is work being done on that, But at this time, I think that it's just best to take the Lumbee word for it. It makes a lot of sense. It's in line with other things that we've found. It's in line with, realistically, what probably happened, and I don't see any reason to truly question that that's the case. And this is not new lore either. We just don't have as good of a record of it. We don't have a record of the Croatoan tribe becoming the Lumbee tribe, but we do have record of people talking about Native Americans with blue eyes and such back as far as Jamestown and shortly after. If you go back and watch my original video and my video about Sir Walter Raleigh, then you will understand why, even though they're being told, yeah, we know what happened to them, essentially, why they didn't go looking. Okay, let's talk about the Dare Stones. I talked about them a little bit in part 2 of the Roanoke videos, but I have gotten comments on them in the first one and in the one that I got yesterday, so let's talk about it just a little bit. Okay, so first of all, what are the Dare Stones? They're these. They're called the Dare Stones because the Dare one was found first, but there's several of them for different families. If you don't remember who the Dares are, Virginia Dare was the first English baby born in the New World, and her grandfather was John White, the leader of the Roanoke colony, until he had to go back for supplies, and when he came back, they were no longer there. So these stones claim to commemorate the presence of the Dares and other colonists from Roanoke, and they tell the story of what happened to them, claiming that they were attacked by the Powhatan. So the first thing that you need to know that is really important is that the first of these stones that was found was the Dare Stone. The second thing you need to know that's important is that the first stone was found in 1937, and the reason that this is important to remember is because it was exactly 350 years after the birth of Virginia Dare as the first English baby in the New World. And the third thing you need to know is that it was found literally right next to the highway. Okay, so why are these important? Number one, the Dares are by far the most famous people from the Roanoke colony. If I told you any of the rest of their names, you would not recognize them. Maybe you don't even recognize the Dare name, but people would. Number two, why is it important that it's 350 years? Because this was in the public consciousness constantly. There was a celebration about the Roanoke colony. There was so much stuff in the news, in the media, in 1937, getting ready for this 350th anniversary of the first English baby born in America. And again, this is putting the Dare name in everybody's faces for this entire year. And why is it important that it's found right next to a highway? Because how did they miss that? How did they miss that there's this big chunk of rock with writing on it that's like super important to American history right next to this major road that they built? There are still some people who think that these are real for various reasons, but most of them were proven to be fake in 1941. I'm not sure how we've gotten almost a century past that, and they're still being reported on as if they're real. There are a lot of people who definitely think they're real based on my comments. There's only one that's still really debated, because the testing that they did on the rock and on the inscription did seem to indicate it was from the right time period, or at least didn't indicate that it wasn't from the right time period like some of the others. But the writing on it, the wording on it, is not consistent with the way that they would have been writing at the time. Like, look at this rock. This is very clearly written in print. They didn't write in print in the 1500s. They didn't do that. Now, you could argue that they're writing on a rock and it would be easier to write this way, but it just seems extremely unlikely, and all of the coincidences that had to line up for these rocks to be found the way that they were, when they were, by the people that they were, is just highly unlikely. We also know for a fact that the Powhatan did not attack them at the Roanoke colony. You can watch the video I did yesterday about whether or not the Powhatan attacked them at all, but it was largely believed that the Powhatan had attacked them based on what the Powhatan had said themselves. And so, until the last like 50 years or so that we've been like, we know that they weren't attacked at their home base, at the Roanoke colony itself. So did the Dare Stones help to prove what happened to the Roanoke colony? Absolutely not, because they are 100% fake.